Grief is such an overpowering emotion, especially after losing someone so close to you. It can take months, years, even decades to get back to normal, if that's even possible after experiencing a significant loss. This podcast was created to help you move through and release the emotions, allowing you to heal the hurt and begin living again. Listen in as I chat with medical professionals, grief workers, and people who have first-hand experience in losing a loved one, what their experience has been, and what they did to help heal themselves and those around them. Life isn't always sunshine and rainbows, but I believe there is always a silver lining if you're willing to look. Welcome to the Release Podcast. Welcome to another episode of Release Grief Podcast. I'm your host, Faith Sage, and here I am with Nick Gaylord, and we have just been having an absolute blast chatting beforehand. I should have been recording, but I wasn't, and I apologize because there was some pretty hilarious stuff that we talked about. Maybe they'll come up, who knows? I don't know. But welcome to the show, Nick. I'm so excited to have you on.
Thank you, Faith. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
I'm so happy and so excited.
Mm-hmm.
No,
All of the exciteds.
I was just making fun because I always say I'm so excited to have you on here, but like it doesn't sound like I'm so excited.
That's right. Just mediocre excited.
I'm almost there. Like,
yeah,
I'm just kidding.
That's right.
It'd be fun.
You could replace me with a Coke machine and nobody's going to know the difference.
Whatever. So Nick, talk to me about, since this podcast is all about grief, it's all about, we're going to get the details first, and then we can have all of the fun conversations afterwards. So tell me why you wanted to sign up for this podcast.
So basically, I wanted to share my story about how I got into podcasting. You and I have at least one mutual friend, probably now several. I was introduced to you through our friend Jason Tuttle, author of Letters to Zachary. Recently interviewed him, recently did a live stream with Jason and Tanya Manley, who I believe you also know. Yeah. So we've been having a lot of fun with that lately, and it's crazy to say fun with some of the things that we're talking about, but honestly, doing all of this work has really been a blast.
I think people, when they think about grief, they think about nothing but tears and crying and, depression and all those things. But grief can be fun. It can be bonding. It can be a wonderful experience as well.
It can. Right. And not always at first and not all the time. I'm not saying that anybody's supposed to be, laughing through a funeral or anything like that. That's not what we're getting at.
Right.
Grief is, it's complicated. It's different for everybody. It's not linear. It is going to be surprising sometimes. You're not really sure what's going to happen until it happens. Right. So unfortunately, sometimes the way to get through it is to just roll with it. But unfortunately, the only way to get past the grief is to get through it. Many people that I have spoken with on my show, and I'm sure many that you've spoken with on your show, have probably given examples of how sometimes they've tried to outrun grief, get around it, navigate it, try to just run away from it or ignore it till it goes away. That shit don't work. It does not work at all. You have to process it. You have to do the hard work. It's a reality that is unfortunate because nobody wants to deal with this, but unfortunately, everybody has to deal with it. Everybody's going to deal with death and with loss and with trauma sometimes. So a lot of times there's going to be grief associated with it. You can either face it head on, you can process it, or you can ignore it. And what will happen then is it's just going to come back and bite and punch you in the gut, and probably worse the second or third or 10th time around than it did the first time. A lot of people don't know how to process grief. I certainly didn't when I had an experience that got me started in podcasting. The name of my podcast is Our Dead Dads. Obviously it was my dad who was sort of the inspiration or whatever you want to call it behind the podcast. We had a very complicated relationship. He died about 3.5 years ago. I am the oldest of his 7 children that I know of. I will always say, I have always said, and will always say that I know of until the day I die. The man was married 5 times, married and divorced 5 times. Excuse me. 7 children. Um, he he was a complicated person. You don't get married and divorced 5 times and not have some complications.
Right.
So it is what it is. It was what it was. Um, I detailed a lot of my story in episode 1 of my podcast. So if you'd like to hear some of the fun stuff I went through, please go find Our Dead Dads on your favorite podcast listening platform. It's available anywhere. Episode 1 is my story. And then it just kind of goes from there. So when, all right, let me back up a little bit. For probably the last, I don't know, 5, 6, 8, whatever years of his life, my brothers and I basically became his caretakers, um, largely because there were a lot of things that he just didn't want to do. And then eventually he physically couldn't do because he didn't take care of himself. And eventually, everybody needed to do everything for him. Um, the last 5 or 6 months of his life, he spent in a nursing care facility where he ultimately passed in May of 2021. And when he passed, this is again something I talk about on my show. My initial feeling was relief in a couple of ways. I was relieved that he was no longer in pain because he suffered a lot with
Mhm.
what he went through. Largely, it was his own doing because again he wouldn't take care of himself. But nonetheless, he was in a lot of pain for a long time. I was happy that that was over because watching him suffer like that, nobody should ever have to go through that.
No.
I was also relieved that just all of the bullshit that my brothers and I put up with for years was also over. It was unpleasant. It wasn't all bad, but largely it was probably more not good than good.
Mhm.
So I grew up in New York on Long Island. Both my wife and I did. We were living in Texas at the time when he passed, so we had to fly up for the funeral. Went up, had the funeral, went back, got back to work, and for the first few months I was fine, and then realized I wasn't fine.
Mhm.
I realized I had a lot of anger toward him, and which was not anything out of the ordinary for
Right.
most of our relationship because of who he was. But this was unprocessed anger, and of course I'm having one-sided conversations because of course he's dead, so he's not going to be able to talk back to
Right.
me. um, Finally I get to have a conversation with him where he's not arguing with me. But that being said, yeah, by the way, dark humor is something I'm fluent in, so you're
Oh.
going to have a little bit of that here. Right, exactly. um I realized that I had a lot of unprocessed anger toward him. And so my wife is actually the one who realized it because I was kind of starting to snap at people and get really irritable and angry. And she recognized it. And rather than throwing it back at
Good
me,
for her.
fortunately,
Yeah.
yeah, good, definitely good for her. She was huge and
Takes
in
a
like realizing that I
rare
was dealing
person
with grief.
to
Sorry.
realize. I mean, it just takes a rare person to realize that, hey, this person is not, they're not being themselves. This is
Right.
they're completely different than what I knew them to be at one point in time.
Yeah.
Something's going on.
And look, we've known each other for 18 and a half years, and she knows me better than I know myself. So she knew very quickly that something was going on and what it was. And she didn't at all try to fight me on it when I was snapping at people at work, at her. She never threw it back at me. She just said, I think you need to talk to somebody. She knew
Yeah.
what was going on.
Right.
And she was right. So I found a therapist online because this was still during COVID. So everything was virtual,
Right.
and found someone, and she was amazing, and started working with her every week for about 6 months. At the end of those 6 months, I got to a point where I was in a much better place with all of my feelings. I was able to put everything into place. I was able to forgive myself for having been so angry at him. I was able to forgive him for being the person that he was. And I was also able to forgive him for not being the person that we all know that he could have been.
Right.
So that was huge. This is probably like early 2022 when the therapy part of it ended. I never say cured because I don't believe any of us are ever cured. This is an ongoing process that continues until the day we die.
I was gonna say, I think the only cure is death.
Yeah, exactly. The only finish
Uh,
line is when the heart stops.
yeah. Otherwise, you need to continue
So,
growing. You need to continue like becoming a better version.
exactly. And I do believe that the only person that any of us ever need to be better than is the person we were yesterday. So as
Yeah.
long as we can continue with that, then we're all moving in the right path. And even that's going to have its stumbles, and that's okay. Every day we wake up is another chance to get it right. So move into 2022. The expression "our dead dads" actually came from my youngest brother, Michael. He and I were texting one day. He was wanted me to try to find something that my dad had. Um, oh, sorry, I received an error message on the screen. I thought that he ended up stopping, but as long as you can hear me,
No, yeah, I can hear you.
okay. Sorry
And
about that.
I believe we're
Um,
still recording. You're good to go.
Perfect. Okay. Hey, things happen. This is what happens when we're live.
Right.
So I was talking with my brother, and he wanted me to try to find something that my dad had had years ago. And at some point in the conversation, he said, "Come on, do it for our dead dad." Of
Mm,
course, we're all fluent in dark humor because of him. So I thought that that was hilarious. It was just absolute gold, and I was laughing my butt off at that. And so I said, "All right, from now on, he's our dead dad." And ever since then, we've always referred to him as anytime we're having a conversation, our dead dad. I have a ongoing group text message conversation with I'm one of seven guys. It's my three younger brothers and three of my best friends that I've known since junior high school. And if you want to know more about those guys, anybody who's listening, episode 2 of the podcast, I interview the brothers. Episodes 3, I interview the friends. So go and find out about the
nice.
merry band of idiots that we all are. And there's actually going to be a holiday episode where the seven of us are going to do an episode that'll be coming out in December for Christmas because all of us loved Christmas. So we're going to talk about that.
Okay.
But to be coming attractions, whatever you want to call it. So the seven of us, I told everybody in the group about what Michael and I talked about. They all thought it was gold. So of course now we just say our dead dads. That's how we talk about our dads.
Because your
Um,
three friends lost their father too?
Yes, all of our dads are gone. Of everybody in the group, my dad, me and my brothers, our dad was actually the last to pass. So yes, all of our dads are gone. So it kind of seemed pretty appropriate.
Yeah.
So we had actually within the group there was conversations here and there about maybe starting a podcast. My friend Mike, yeah, there's a brother Mike and a friend Mike. My friend Mike
It's not
suggested
confusing at all.
no, yeah, not confusing at all. If you meet all these guys, there's no way to confuse the two of them for sure.
Okay.
My brother is tall and bald. My other friend is well, a little bit shorter and not bald, but yeah, very distinct differences. We all have our qualities.
Right.
Anyway, my friend Mike decided that we should do a podcast. And I said, "Well, what about?" And he said, "Well, we should do something like Howard Stern show." And I'm like, "No, not at all." He's like, "Come on, we're hilarious. People would laugh their asses off." And I said, "That may be true, but you don't try to mimic somebody else's
Right.
show." So I said, "No, I'm not doing that." He's like, "Come on, come on." I was like, I'm not doing a Howard Stern type podcast." He's like, "What about like Opie and Anthony?" And he threw up a couple of other examples. No, we need something original. We need
Right.
genuine. So of course that idea really never went anywhere. And I asked all of them, like, all right, if we do, because the conversation kind of got going with everybody, I said, if we do a podcast, let's talk about the logistics. Like, I'm the only one who's not in New York, but you're all in different spaces and different locations. Is everybody going to have laptops? Everybody going to get microphones? Who's going to edit the episodes? Who's going to maintain everything, find guests? Are we going to be able to get on the same page and do a set time every week? Of course, nobody had any answers. So I said, all right, when you guys figure this out, get back to me. But of course, nobody did. So needless to say, there's not a group podcast. Earlier this year, January 1st, I found myself, excuse me, unemployed for the first time pretty much ever. I work in the pharmaceutical clinical trial med device industry, and I was on a almost 2-year contract, which ended at the end of last year. So January 1st, I'm out of a job, trying to find another one. And eventually I start thinking of other things that I could do because for the first time ever, I have time on my hands. So to avoid climbing the walls and driving my wife crazy, I'm thinking, what else can I do? And I had another friend who was getting ready to start a podcast of her own at the time. And we kind of had some conversations. And I thought, you know what? Maybe there's something there.
Why not?
So yeah, maybe. I started thinking about it a little bit here and there, didn't really go crazy with it. I started following a few people who had some podcasts that were really good. The first one was I don't know if you know her, but her name is Christina Driscoll.
Yep.
I found her. She is the host of the She's Brave podcast, and just started following her and listened to her show. And then a few weeks later, this is probably like early February of this year, she put a thing up on her Facebook page that she was going to be offering a class for anybody who wanted to create their own podcast. So she and I start talking online and then on the phone, and I give her like my pitch because I kind of figured if I'm going to do anything with podcasting, I want to talk about grief. I
Hmm.
don't, it's not the worst story. It's not the most horrific, traumatic story ever, but it's a story. It's mine. So this is all I have to work off of.
Right.
Um, and I knew that if I was going to do this, I would want to get my story out there first because try to lead by example. If I'm going to get other people to talk about theirs, I should be willing to talk about mine as well. So
Right.
I didn't want to ever ask anybody to do something that I wasn't willing to do. So I told her all of this, said, I want to put my story out there. I want to interview other people, help people to process their grief. She thought it was a phenomenal idea. She's like, you need to do this, of course. And so I was a little bit worried about the financial aspect of it because, again, I'm not working at the time. So I didn't really want to make a huge investment. And I told her I was concerned about that. And she basically said, look, I totally get it. But after hearing your story, just listening to you, talking to you, I know you've got the passion for this. I mean, I also told her something which is true that I've always had this desire to help people. I never knew how, but just ever since I was a kid, I just knew I always wanted to do something to help people. And she said, if you don't do this, you're going to regret it. So
Yeah.
if you wait until you have a job, if you wait until money's not as much of an issue, you're going to be busy. You're going to find 100 reasons not to do it, and you'll never do it. She
She's
said,
100% correct.
start. She was, and she said, just start the process. If you get a job and it becomes overwhelming and it's too much, you can always put podcasting on the back burner and
Oh,
focus on your
yeah.
job. So I said, all right, you're right. Talked to my wife. She agreed. We're all in. So did the class. And I think it was it was a once a week class on Zoom every Thursday. I think it was week 7 or 8 by the time that I had a job. And that was my first week starting. I missed one week of the class, but I was able to watch it on Zoom. And then the other ones I did during my lunch hour. And so it was an amazing class, got a lot of information out of it. Still talk to Christina and a lot of the ladies in the class frequently. And so I was off and running. I, by the way, to preface this, I've never had any experience with radio or media or anything. And I also was somebody who just despised the sound of my own voice recorded. And it was hard to get past that.
I think
Um,
a lot of people don't
I,
realize, like, until they start,
yeah,
how, like, when you hear your voice, you're like, oh, it's so creepy.
yeah, it
But
was
then
cringy for
eventually it's like, oh, okay, yep, I'm talking about
right.
this. I'm talking about that. It's fine after you get through that initial phase of it.
Right. After you get through that, you're good. And other people are saying, you've got a radio voice. You've got a great voice for this. You need to
Yep.
do this. And I'm like, what the hell are you people talking about? Like, have you
What are
heard
you
me?
hearing that I'm not? Like,
Yeah,
how
exactly. What are you hearing that I'm not? But as with many things in life, I kind of realized that when everybody else feels a certain way about something, it's either the biggest conspiracy ever or it's the truth. So everybody's
right.
saying, you've got the voice, you need to do this. So I just kind of threw caution to the wind and said, all right, I'm just going to believe everybody and I'm going to do this.
It's a good call.
I very quickly got past not enjoying the sound of my own voice, editing enough episodes, listening to it. I didn't even it didn't bother me eventually. So
Mhm.
luckily I got over it very quickly. If I knew that it was going to be that easy to get over it, I would have started podcasting years ago instead of
Right.
spending 48 years hating the sound of my voice. But so I decided to start. I started doing interviews and I decided that I wanted to have at least 10 interviews recorded and edited and ready to go, ready to publish before I ever dropped number one because I knew with a full time job, I was going to need to be ahead,
Hmm.
not processing an episode every week and trying to rush. It would be crazy. So that's what I did. I think I had somewhere between 8 and 10. ready to go by the time I dropped the first one. Actually, on week one, on June 18th of this year, I dropped the first 3 episodes. Me,
Mm.
the brothers, and the friends did all that on the first day. The next week, I dropped episode 4 was interviewing my wife. And then from there, we were just off and running with everybody else. And at this point, um, I honestly cannot believe how much this has exploded. Like I just dropped episode 14 this past Tuesday. Episodes drop every Tuesday. Occasionally, thank you. Occasionally, a bonus episode will drop on Fridays.
Mhm.
So at this point, I've dropped episode 14. I have done interviews through, I think, 25 or 26, and I have guests lined up to around episode 50. So it's insane. I've actually had to close off the scheduling calendar for full interviews for the rest of the year because it was quickly getting out of control. And it's a great problem to have, but I mean,
Is
you
it
know,
can be
I had to.
overwhelming too.
It definitely got to that point, but I'm so happy and so honored to be able to work with so many amazing people that people are willing to share their stories with me. Who the hell am I? I'm somebody
Right.
that nobody has met, and yet people are willing to share their stories with me because people need a platform. People need an outlet to talk about what they've been through. I've talked with a lot of people who have told their stories before, and I've talked with some people who haven't told their story publicly at all. And those are frequently the best ones because it really I can like see when we're on a Zoom call, I can like see the weight being lifted off their shoulders
Yeah. I
and
was
just how
just
they
gonna ask
feel.
you, do you
Yeah.
think that it's so in your experience with the podcasting, do you think it helps you when you talk to
It
these people, like with your own grief, like
I have to
processing
say it
through it?
does. I did not count on that in the beginning. I didn't think or anticipate that it was going to be therapeutic for me personally, because again, my mission was to help others. I didn't realize that it was going to help me. And holy hell, it really has been a continued therapy process that, like I said, that I didn't see coming. I had spoken about earlier how I got past the anger toward my dad and all of those feelings and was able to put everything into place. And that is still the case. I am happy to say that I have not, since I finished therapy, I have not had a single day that I spent angry at my dad. Uh, I still recognize the relationship. I recognize what he was, but I'm also able to recognize the good parts.
Mm,
Excuse me, the good parts of the relationship, the things that I got from him that are still very much a part of my life and are on a regular basis that I'm so happy about. He unfortunately made a lot of unfortunate choices. I know I just said unfortunate twice. Sorry.
that's
he
all right.
made yeah he made some unfortunate choices with how to live his life, how to be a husband, how to be a father. It sucks. It is what it is. He was going to do what he was going to do. He wasn't the greatest employee. He was an X-ray tech for 35-ish years and loved his job, was very good at it. Unfortunately, he lost a lot of jobs because he couldn't keep his mouth shut. If he ever had a tiff with his boss and he wanted to tell his boss to go fuck himself, he would tell his boss to go fuck himself, literally. And many times it put him in a position where he either had to quit or he got fired.
Right.
And he got to the point where he could no longer do that because he worked in every hospital on Long Island, and
Have to move
he
to another
became,
state.
what's that?
You'd have to move to another state.
Pretty much, and that wasn't happening. So he ended up getting a job as a bus driver for a big charter bus company on Long Island, did that until he retired. And then, just basically after he was divorced in 2003, when he wasn't working, he spent his time watching TV, parked on the couch, playing video games, eating, not doing really anything physical. And it took a toll. And so, like I said before, it was a lot of the health problems that he had. It was unfortunately self-inflicted, but it is what it is. But I was able to get past all that, and I'm still able to rather just look at the positive things. The negatives, it's always going to be there. There's really no point in harping on it at this point. I had to harp on it a little bit in episode 1. That was tough for me. That was tough to record. I mean, I wrote I wrote the details, the outline of it out, and I knew what I was going to talk about, and it was still hard to talk about it because it was kind of like reliving all of it.
It is.
But after, yeah, it was. But after that, after the episode was over, after I stopped recording, it was all right. That's done. It's over. I didn't let the anger manifest. I didn't go crazy with it. I had my hour or so that I was talking, and that was it. Even editing, it was like, all right, I just do this and make it sound good. But it didn't bother me really, even while I was listening to it. And I realized over the course of time that this has become and this has been very therapeutic for me. I'm so fortunate that all of my guests that I've spoken with have told me that this has been very
Yeah.
helpful for them, especially the ones that hadn't talked about this in public before. But just even the folks that had talked about it, they still all
Yeah.
felt a little bit better after the conversations were over. And that is why I'm so adamant about doing this. And I'm so adamant about getting this podcast out there because there's so many grief podcasts. You've got one. Jason doesn't have a podcast, but his grief group, Letters to Zachary, about his son, the book that he just published. There are so many people in the field of grief, and I very quickly realized you didn't have to go to school for this. You don't have to be
Oh,
a professional. You don't have to have a master's or a bachelor or a doctorate or whatever. You can do this and you can help people without
just
having
your
all of that.
story. Just
Yeah,
how you're navigating it, as long as you're navigating it,
right.
um, can help people. It astounds me as well, how many people get caught up in it.
Mhm.
Um, and I don't want to say that in a bad way. I'm not saying that in a bad way, that get caught up
No.
in the grief, because sometimes, when you have such a complicated relationship with people, it's very easy to get caught up in the anger, or the depression of it, or whatever
Yes.
it is. And I liken grief is to mindset work. Like,
Right.
you need a lot of mindset work to go through it,
Yeah.
because there's a lot of things that you have to come to terms with in your head, because you can't talk to this person anymore. You can't
Right.
um, ask questions anymore. So you have to be okay with everything inside of yourself.
You do. You really have to. You have to, whatever you want to call it, find a place, compartmentalize whatever the word is that
Mhm.
you want to use. You have to find a place for all of it, or it will drive you batshit crazy.
Eat you alive.
It
Literally.
will. It will eat you alive. There are so many people that are angry and are depressed and are getting crushed under the weight of the grief that they are dealing with that they don't even necessarily realize they're dealing with it. They
Right.
don't realize that they're holding it in. So many people you ask, like, I'm fine. Are you? Let's talk about that. I don't want to talk about it. You're not fine.
You're really, really fine then. I can
Yeah.
tell.
Yeah,
Like,
I can tell. Yeah, you're totally fine.
your ticking time bomb just waiting to happen
Yeah,
is literally what I.
exactly. All of us who deal with grief and deal with anger and don't find a way to process it, don't find an outlet for it. We are ticking time bombs. We are pressure cookers. What happens with a pressure cooker if you don't release some of the pressure? It
Well,
explodes.
yeah, and it hurts somebody in
And
the
and
process,
it
something
hurts
or
somebody.
someone.
And I know that I'm not saying I was on a dangerous path when I was dealing with my dad's grief, but just the anger that I was dealing with and starting to take it out on other people. I'm glad that my wife realized it as quickly as she did because I am not that person. And we all have our bad moments. We all get angry and frustrated, but that definitely wasn't me. And I
Mhm.
certainly didn't, once she pointed it out, I kind of reflected and realized, and I wasn't liking the person that I was being
Coming,
at
yeah.
that point in time. And I think if everybody who's dealing with a grief or a grieving situation would take a little bit of time to do some self-reflection and see who you are in the here and now while you're dealing with the situation as opposed to who you were before this ever started, I would be shocked if you don't see a lot of differences because
Right.
we all have been there. This is something that I have talked about on my podcast. When I talk with anyone who has a story who wants to share, your situation is unique. It is
Mhm.
unique to you. Like me and my three brothers, or my three brothers and I, which I'm not sure which of those is correct. Either way, the
Whichever.
four of yeah, we'll go with the four of us.
Right.
We all have the same dad. The first two of us have the same mom. The other two have a different mom. Like that we were wife number two. They were wife number five. Um, just for to
Just for reference
just
purposes.
for reference. But we all had the same dad, yet the four of us had very different experiences with him. So that's what I mean when I don't mean like necessarily you, but like any person, one has a unique experience. The experience is individual to them. Your situation, however, dealing with the grief, dealing with the loss, the anger, the frustration, the depression, whatever it is, you're nowhere close to unique. You are the same as every one of us. We have all been there. It's just different levels of it.
Mhm.
So I haven't heard this yet from anybody. But if anybody says, if anybody would say, you have no idea what I'm going through, that's right and wrong. You particularly with the relationship that you had with the person that you lost, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, that part I don't understand. But dealing with grief,
Grief part? I
yes,
do.
I do. And so do so many of us.
Yes.
And as we've already talked about, you need to process it, in your own time and on your own timeline, but the
And in
common
your own
denominator
way.
is in your own way, right? But the
Yeah.
common denominator of all of it is you have to process it.
Yeah.
If you don't, you're not going to get better. In fact, things will get worse.
Mhm.
And anybody who's listening, who's been through it, can probably relate to that. And anybody who's going through their own grief, who may be hearing this and hasn't begun to process it, reflect a little bit and think about it.
So I have a
And
question.
what's that?
So as you're talking about the unprocessed grief,
Yeah.
what does that look like if they were to maybe potentially think that they had it? Like, what are some signs and some symptoms like that you were doing besides just snapping at people? Because you can have a frustrated day and be snapping at people too.
Oh,
Uh,
sure. And I've had a few of those.
right.
um,
But what does that look like? Like, what did it look like for you?
so for me, it was thinking about my dad a lot, and based on the relationship that I had with him, more than I really cared to be thinking about him. I
Mm,
was at the point where he's dead. I never want to say I'm glad he's dead, but like I said before, my initial feeling was relief. So you can
And then when you
understand
thought about him, did you get angrier and angrier as the more you thought about him?
in the first couple of months, no. But once, so he died in May of 2021. Once we get into like August, September, we're talking 3, 4 months after. Yeah, I was starting to get angry. Not necessarily first, I was getting angry because I was thinking about him so much and I really didn't want to be. I was again being relieved that he was gone and that the shit show was over. I didn't want to spend so much time thinking about him.
Mhm.
And it just kept going on and going. The thoughts were there and I couldn't get rid of them. So between that, yeah, I guess I was starting to get angry about that. And then, of course, the more he's on my mind, the more I start thinking about all the shit that irritated me about him when he was alive. So that was making me angrier. So yeah, the anger was building. I was a pressure cooker and didn't realize it. It was all about anger for me. I wasn't, again, taking it out in a physical way. I wasn't,
Right,
doing anything harmful to myself or anybody else. But at the same time, it doesn't just have to be physical to be harmful. Words can be
right.
harmful too. Luckily, I wasn't at that point where I was just spouting things off and just being a disgusting human being, as my dad unfortunately was many times when he was alive. Just because he never got physical. He always used his mouth. What he didn't
Oh.
do with his hands, he more than made up with his mouth.
Mm,
Um, and I was getting angry because I was just tired of thinking about him. I was tired of thinking about the things that irritated me so much about him when he was alive. So that's what got me into therapy. But that's also what I've been able to process and compartmentalize and put in a place where I'm no longer angry. he did the same shit. It didn't change just because he's dead. It didn't change just because I'm doing a podcast and because I'm talking freely about it with you and so many other people, whether on my show or on other shows. It didn't change. It hasn't gone away. It's just different. I can see it in a different light now.
Right.
And that's what I think is key for anyone who's dealing with grief and hasn't, who, if you can recognize the signs, if you can recognize that there is some stuff going on that you need to deal with, but you haven't figured out how to deal with it, I'm here to tell you talking about it is going to make more of a difference than you may be aware of right now. You,
Like, even if that's your starting point, is to just
you
talk to someone about
just,
it.
yeah,
Find someone that is non-judgmental, though, I would
right.
say, first of all, maybe even who doesn't even know your parent or anything, or the person that's passed that doesn't even
Yeah.
know them, maybe, and just be able to, get all the anger, the resentment, the
Hmm.
hopes, the fears,
Yep.
everything out, because it'll release that tank that's inside of you when
Yeah.
everything starts to bubble up and you
Yeah.
feel like you're gonna cry. Like, and I know guys cry too. When you feel like you're gonna cry,
Yes.
feel like you're getting there and you can't stop it and all those things, and you just have to, and then all of a sudden everything just comes out.
Yeah. Men
And then
cry.
the tank
Men
is
get emotional.
released. Yep. And then the tank is released and then it
Yeah.
does that process again.
Right.
Um, did you
Um,
think that when you, sorry,
no, go ahead.
did you think that when your father passed, that the grief process would be easy because of the relationship that you had with him?
I didn't know what to expect. I wasn't really familiar with the concept of a grief process. Um, Growing up, uh, we didn't talk about this.
No.
Boys didn't talk about this. Anytime that it was brought up, the adults would always say, especially to boys, and I know the experience is different in many ways for women and for men, but as boys, we were told, why are you thinking about that? Why are you talking about that? You don't need to be worrying about that. And so, all right, fine, we don't talk about it. And as a result, we're all fucked up as adults because we didn't talk about it as kids or as teenagers or young adults.
Yeah.
It was a taboo topic in society, not just in my
Or you were
family
just,
or in,
or you're just shielded from it. Like,
we were,
you
yeah.
don't
And I understand that the adults in my life were trying to shield me from it, but hiding the truth out there, hiding what was the ugly truth, didn't make anything better. It made things worse. And I know that that was not anybody's intention. I'm not
know.
saying, I'm not holding anything against, my parents or aunts and uncles or grandparents or other people in my life.
Well, it's just
Never.
something that we do. Like, you don't want your
Yeah.
children to see death because death isn't
No.
final. It's not the person that they once were. It's this body that is, no longer has life.
Yeah. It's a transition, basically.
Mhm.
Um,
And it can be harsh and
it,
cold and
it can,
and
but
nobody, go
it's
ahead.
also reality.
It
Um,
is. And so it's like, okay, we should be showing our children this. That way
yeah.
they know that they're not going to live forever because I had this weird thing.
Yeah.
Like, I'm gonna live forever. I never thought about growing old.
Yeah.
I never thought
Right.
about death. I never thought about the finality of taking my last breath. You
Right. None of us want to face
have
our own
that.
mortality.
Nobody talks about it.
No.
Well, I mean, they do
We
more now than what they did, but at the
Sure.
time they
We
didn't.
know it's going to happen eventually, but
We don't
we don't
talk
want to
about
talk about it. We don't want to talk about it. So we didn't because society didn't. Society doesn't want to deal with uncomfortable topics. And at this point, I've interviewed people in 6 different countries, and it's the same everywhere. This is not an America problem. This is not a New York problem.
it. This is the world
This
problem.
is a world problem. This is a society problem. Uh, Not with 100% of people, but way north of 50%. We'll
Hmm.
go with that. Almost everybody. It's a problem everywhere. And it is getting better, but it still needs to change. The stigma around death and loss and grief, it's got to change. Um, I did an interview recently. Actually, it was last week's episode 13, that dropped. It was with a gentleman named Paul Rubin. He is the director of a children's grief camp on Long Island. This is a camp that they do a camp twice a year, a full weekend, like from Friday afternoon to Sunday morning. A camp for children ages 7 to 17 who have lost a parent or a sibling.
Mm.
And several people have reached out to me, people that I've known personally and people that I've interviewed have reached out to me since that episode dropped and said, "Holy shit, where was that camp when I was a kid?" I interviewed a friend of mine who his episode is coming up in a few weeks, who lost his dad at 5, and
Mm.
had basically no memory of his dad's of his dad at all. I have another friend who his episode is a little bit behind that one. He lost his dad at 6, and he is still dealing with so much shit because everybody has told him for his entire life, "Oh, your dad was amazing. You're just like him. He was so wonderful." And his feelings have always been, "Well, that's great that you have those memories, but I have nothing."
Right. He's
And
a
so
shadow.
he's been dealing with that. And now he's been dealing with a lot more stuff recently because he has a son, his son and his wife are about to have a baby. So he's about to be a grandfather. There's a lot of stuff that he's been dealing with, and like the
Mm.
emotions are coming out, and he's been listening since episode 1, and he finally said, "Yeah, let's do an interview," and was thrilled to. And it was a tough one. His is actually going to be a two-parter. We talked for probably about 2 hours, but what we uncovered a lot of stuff, and also uncovered that he needs to speak with a professional. So we basically, at the end of the interview, we pretty much said, "All right, we're going to leave this here for now. You're going to do what you're going to do," because his grandchild is, I think, going to be born in January. So I said, "All right, you've got 5 months." And he's like, "All right, dickhead, thanks for the clock." And now I have I'm up against a wall with time. I said, "Well, I mean, you
We
can
all
do it, or
are.
you don't have to do it."
Yeah. You don't
Yeah.
have to, but
Right.
want to be a better
But
grandfather and
yeah, he knows he's going to. And I mean, I'm excited that he's going to do that. And we, at some point early next year, we are going to basically do a part 2 of his interview to
oh,
talk
that's
about
awesome.
his process when, when he's ready to do that. Um, I love doing this so much. I didn't realize how much I was going to get into this. And the one thing I knew is that it was going to turn into a second full-time job, and it has. And it is a
Yeah,
lot of work, and it is worth every bit of it.
it's a
Fortunately,
lot of work.
my wife is amazing, and she's so supportive with everything that I'm doing. She knows how much I'm loving this. She sees the passion that I have for it. And also, luckily, she is very busy with she's a travel agent. She runs her own business. So we have got so much going on, but at the same time, we are also able to find enough time to put aside for ourselves and just have us time. Like, there's our dead dad's time, there's Kim Gaylord travel time, there's Nick and Kim time. And we don't let our work consume us, even though it has become a lot. But we've been through our own stuff before, and we recognize that we need to prioritize us, especially for us personally, the fact that we do not have children of our own. We tried for years. It didn't happen. It's okay. We're not the first. We're not the last. But because of when that happened, when we knew we reached that point where the door had closed for children for us, we immediately said, we are going to take life by the short hairs, and we're going to get every fucking thing that we can out of life. And we're going to do amazing things. And we have. That was probably 10 years ago. We ended up, a couple years later, we ended up moving to Texas, which for a while, we never thought we were going to leave Long Island, and we did. And if we had had kids, it may have been something that held us back, but
Right.
it was just the two of it. Well, us and the cat, and she'll go anywhere. All she needs is her food or toys or litter box and some windows to look out,
It's good.
and her 2 humans.
Right.
But we went to Texas and had 6 great years there. And then at a certain point, we decided we were ready to be done and go on to the next thing. And we moved to Tampa. We've been here for almost 2.5 years. And we are just living life as much as we can. And we're going to get everything we can out of it. We travel. We love being the cool aunt and uncle. We love, our nieces and nephews, but at the same time, we, we've never said that we are glad we didn't have kids, because there was time we really wanted to. But at this
Right.
point, we are glad that we have the ability to move past that and to focus on us and to prioritize us. We've been together for 18 and a half years, and we've got an incredible relationship, and I love every bit of it. And of course, she drives me crazy, and I drive her crazier. But that's part of the fun of it.
I mean, do you really have a good marriage if you're not?
Yeah, seriously, if you say you do and you say that everything's perfect and you have no problems, you're
Boring
lying to
then.
your,
You're
yeah, you're
boring.
boring or you're lying.
Right? Either
Yeah,
one.
but I love that we've been doing this. I love that I have somebody who is so supportive and who encouraged me and gave me the kick in the ass to really dive into this and to do this podcast and just kind of to give me the grace to spend the amount of time that I've spent on it. It's yes, it's a little bit overwhelming at times, but holy hell, it is so rewarding. Just the people that I have gotten to get to know and work with and talk with, people like you and Jason and so many others that I would not have met if it wasn't for this podcast. I'm so grateful for it, and this isn't stopping anytime soon. This is full steam ahead, and I don't know what's going to become of it. I'm not saying that this is going to be a top 10 podcast worldwide, because I'm sure it won't, because I'm not famous. What's
Oh,
that?
and like it and
Yeah,
share it.
exactly. Exactly.
Just a small little plug for our dead
That's
dad.
I appreciate it.
I mean,
Look,
while you're there, go ahead and like and subscribe and share mine too.
yes, please like and subscribe, share both of these podcasts. But look, obviously, I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't want to try to grow at least a little bit. Because
Right.
the more that I can grow, the more people that find out about this, the more that they will tell others, the more people that will listen. Look, I know that this is not a sexy topic. Nobody wants to regularly talk about
Nobody
grief
wants to
and death.
talk about dead people all day long. The
No, they
feelings,
don't.
emotions that are associated with, that's all
No.
boring. Tell me about the time you went skydiving or the time that you booped a shark on
Right.
the nose. I want to hear about those
That's
times.
what people want to talk about, and that's what
Like,
they want to hear.
no.
Yeah, no, I've never skydived, and I'm not getting in a pool with a shark.
Come
So nope.
on. Come
Yeah,
on.
fuck that.
So right after, so short story long, we
Mhm.
lost my stepdaughter in 2016, and
Mhm.
then I lost a granddaughter in 2021. 21? Yeah, because it'll be 3 years this year.
Mhm.
And after I lost my granddaughter, I was like, it's probably a year after. I'm like, man, this grief feels a lot like fear. Um, and I realized I was closing in on myself.
Yep.
Wasn't doing anything. I was at home. I'm a homebody anyway, but like
Mhm.
I was a real big homebody at that point in time. I'm like, I couldn't
Right.
leave my phone and I didn't want to leave my house, and just going in town 3 miles to the local Walmart to buy a gallon of milk was extremely difficult for me. I realized
Right.
I need to move my ass and do something because something's not right. Even though I
Right.
had been working on my grief, doing all the things.
Yeah.
And I had come up with a Bad Bitch Adventure Club that is still going to
Nice.
make an appearance here soon. It was too soon at that point. So within the next year, I'll probably be doing a Bad Bitch Adventure Club.
Ooh,
But I
I'm
had
excited.
planned out like 4 adventures to face your fear, to like move past those thresholds. And one of them was booping a shark on the nose out of San Francisco as
Okay.
a group and staying at a castle and like just having fun as a group of women going and doing that, or a group of people even going and doing that. And I thought that that would be, I'm petrified of sharks, petrified.
Mhm.
And then I didn't even realize until after I had planned it all out that I'm actually petrified of being underwater for that long.
Okay. That's fair.
Like you're hitting all of these other fears and stuff. And
Right.
then another one was swimming with the manatees in Florida. And I'm like, okay, there's there's alligators or crocodiles or whatever the fuck one is there. I don't know which one.
There's
Is in the
both.
waters with those.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm petrified of those too because they swim faster than me and they have bigger teeth. I'm like, oh my
Yes,
God.
they do. And they have a bite that you can't power out of.
No, 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 no. So I'm like, okay, here's another. So I had 4 fears, like 4 trips planned and all
Yeah.
this stuff. And I was so excited. And then I'm like, I pulled it back because I'm like, one, I wasn't ready to jump all in on that one. And
Right.
two, I needed to make sure I was providing levels to know that these people that were going with me
Mhm.
they weren't gonna hit in the middle of a grief storm just before going out there. You know,
Right.
that they had been working on their grief. They had been doing the things to process this stuff. And so I'm like, Faith, let's not be irresponsible about this. Let's pull back for a minute and let's, calm your shit.
Right.
So, but it is, it's still going to happen at some point.
Well, I'm excited to see that. I hope there's going to be pictures and videos.
Of course. I mean, did it really happen if there's not?
That's right.
In
No
this
proof.
day and age?
Nope. No proof.
There's not 10 reels, 4 TikToks, and a YouTube video. It didn't happen.
It did not happen. I love that.
So,
I'm excited to see that.
yeah, I'm excited too. Shitting my pants, but I'm excited for it.
Yeah, but you're going to conquer all your fears. You just said there's four things on that list that you're going to knock off in one shot.
Well, no, not one shot. They're 4 different adventures. So, because I
Okay.
did one, so one was in San Francisco, California, and then one was in Florida.
Okay.
For the manatees, and then one was in Vegas for the I wanted to go blow shit up because I
Hmm.
love shooting guns. I love going out there. I want to shoot flamethrowers and mortars and pistols and go out into the desert and do all this. And they have a company out there that takes you out in the middle and does all this. And I'm like, why not? Like, to get your anger out, that's hella good. And then going into a smash house, yes, please.
Damn. Not even just to get your anger out, but just for the sake of blowing shit up.
Yes.
I mean, look, I'm
And
a
I
guy.
think women
I
need
understand.
so when I posted that one and talked about that one, all the guys were like, "Can I go? Can I go?" The women were not too much excited about it. But I was like, the men were like, "I want to go. I want to. That sounds like fun." I'm like, "Okay."
Wow. You know, you just gave me a good idea for an episode. I might have to, we might have to exchange some information and find out where these places are. I might
Yeah.
have to interview somebody from that place and say, hey, men, women, do you need an outlet? Do you want to experience your own therapy? Go here.
Yeah, exactly.
See,
Because then
this,
there's a restaurant in Vegas
okay.
where you're sitting like on the top of it. Nothing is like below you. You're
Hmm.
strapped in and you're eating dinner up there.
Okay.
Stratosphere, I believe.
Yes, I think it
That was
is.
one of the dinners that was going to be for the going to Vegas one. And so, well,
That would
I
scare the
have an
shit out of me.
imagination. My problem is I need an adventure sugar daddy to pay for it all, or sugar
Right.
mom. Ain't prejudice.
Hey, exactly. Either one. No, there's no judgment here. Or
No.
both. You get a throuple going, and
Oh,
that's even
hey,
more
yeah,
money.
right. Like I
There's,
can host some shit, like
hmm.
create it and think it and
That's right. You just need to be able to afford it.
right. That's the
Oh.
problem. My husband tells me that all the time. He's like, babe, that's I'm like, don't talk right now.
Right. Yeah, just we won't talk to him about the sugar daddy or the sugar mama part.
Oh, he already knows. It's fine. I
All
ain't
right, well
out.
then
They're just gonna get to go on an adventure.
that's right. It's not like they're moving in or anything. And I mean, look,
No,
if there's enough of the money and you guys want to share, then hey, look, if
absolutely.
they can fund the adventures that you're gonna have for the rest of your life, then whatever, move them in. Like I said, no judgment here.
Right,
You
right.
didn't think this conversation was going to go in that direction, did you?
Oh, sure. Oh, well, not with this one. No, no, I did. No, I did not.
That's
But it's
okay.
fun.
That's
It's fun. I think
that's
that
the fun part about this.
as we move through grief, we find different ways to, and different levels as to where we're at,
Yeah,
and my grief closed me down
right.
instead of woke me up, and so I had to find my pathway through that.
And
And
that's I think the same with a lot of people. It,
I
it's
think so.
it's not the same solution there's a billion books out there with how to deal with grief and the stages of grief, and it's not the same experience for everybody, as we've
No.
already talked about. You have to find what your path is, but the important part is you have to figure it out. You have to find that
Right.
path. Just take the first step. And look, nobody's saying that you have to go through the phases of grief or the steps of grief in a particular order. I know there's
No,
some
they
books,
don't.
5 steps or 7 steps or whatever. Just because you get to phase 3 doesn't mean you might not find yourself back in phase 2 at some point, or phase 1. You're going to have steps forward and steps backward. This is the case with everybody. It's not a singular process where it's going to be constantly moving forward. Everybody's going to have setbacks. Look,
Yep.
people, just do it. If you're dealing with a situation, if you need to talk to somebody, like Faith already said, sometimes a stranger is the best person. I have had so many people in my life and my experience who have just randomly started conversation, like friends or coworkers or whatever, that have started conversations with me and said, "Hey, I just need to get some stuff off my chest. Can we go talk somewhere for a few
Yeah.
minutes?" And not having any idea what we were going to talk about, but again, the same common denominator applies, that they always said at the end they felt better because they
Mhm.
just needed to have an outlet. Sometimes that's all you need. It doesn't have to be with somebody who you're super close with. I mean, like when my wife said you need to talk to somebody, I knew right away that person wasn't going to be with her. Not
Right.
that because I'm not going to talk to her about it, because we've talked about everything, but the work that I needed to do, the things that I needed to process, I needed to talk with somebody who was completely
Skills and
removed from the situation.
qualifications also to help you with that.
Yes. Have the qualifications, number one, and number two, was removed from the situation. Somebody who was not going to judge what I said, is just going to work with me through the process. If they need to judge a little bit, fine, judge, but mostly it's about somebody who could get me through the process that I needed to get through. Because at
Mhm.
that point, I realized I had to prioritize myself and my own shit, because otherwise I wasn't going to be able to be of significant use to anybody else.
Which stage, if which stage was the hardest for you to get through? Was it the anger, or was it like the depressionish stuff, or a
So
combination?
I have to say there really wasn't depression. The anger, I mean, again, I guess maybe because of my situation, just largely have been relieved. I was never depressed. I never had this feeling of overwhelming depression and sadness and, just lost that he was gone. It was like, all right, it's over. Like, I mean, maybe if we had had a better relationship, I might
Right.
have. Um, I didn't hate the man. He's my dad. I love him still, but I just also recognized that he was an asshole.
Right.
Um, you have to be able to recognize the situation for what it is and for what it was. The anger was probably the hardest part. Um, Finding a way to put that in its place was very difficult. I probably, because I was angry at him for so long, because he just didn't want to take care of himself, because of how he treated his kids, because of how he treated his ex-wives, for how he treated people in general. He just, I don't know, he was full of himself and full of shit at the same time. He thought that he was God's gift to everything, to
Mm.
women, to everything. He, of course, he thought that he walked on water. I mean, only a person like that is going to be able to get married 5 times. Or maybe not, but or somebody with a lot of money. But
Right.
he didn't have that, so he went on his charm. I mean, even when he was, even in his later life, he was a hell of a charmer. It
Mm.
Hearing some of the things that I heard about him, there was in I think it was in episode 2 with yeah, my brother Michael. He was talking about a particular story about him and my dad at a supermarket, which everybody's going to have to go listen because I'm not going to ruin the story. But just hearing that, I mean, that was probably within like the last 5 years before he died, and he's flirting with cashiers. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
really, like you got nothing to offer these people, and you're still his end response after the end of that story was, "I still got it." So again, it was all about him. And look, if that's what made him happy, then God bless you, dude. Do whatever you're
Right.
gonna do. But yeah, the anger was the hardest part, and I'm so grateful for the therapist that I work with, and excuse me, for my wife for being so supportive, and just for the whole process, for everything that I've learned and continue to learn through this process, because it wasn't like I did that and it was over.
No,
This has continued
continual
in
learning.
a huge way through doing this podcast. And as much as I know that people have said that I had been helpful to them at times in the past, I hope that that has improved many, many fold since then and during the course of like the last 6 or 7 months of this process. And
Right.
hopefully it will just continue to increase so that I can, continue helping people through their grief and finding their paths forward.
Right.
And luckily, I've talked to a lot of people on the show who are life coaches, who are therapists, who are counselors, or people who have been through obviously their own shit before. Most of them have said, have said to the listeners, if you ever need to reach out to anybody, you can reach out to me. And I put their contact information in the show notes of an episode. And I'm
Mhm.
so grateful for that. So,
Yeah. I mean, it's nice to have a collective of people to be able to turn to when,
yeah.
like this, a podcast. Like,
Yeah.
this grief is so intimate
Hmm.
that I know when it first happened, like in 16, when I was first shoved into it, I would have never went to one of those groups. Well,
Right.
actually, I didn't. I never went to one of those groups.
Right.
Um, and it was like, I'm not gonna, this is mine, this is personal, and I have to be the one to, um, work through it.
Hmm.
But also, it was just like, I don't know, it just felt awkward for me to be able to share my story at that point in time.
Yeah.
Um, because I guess I wasn't sure of what I was doing, or, um, because she was also my stepdaughter, so there was a whole lot of issues and emotions along with that too.
Right.
Um, and so it made it, I don't know, it complicated it in my head, and that could just be me that complicated the shit out of it in my own head, but I
Maybe.
realized it stopped me for many, many years of, like, pushing my story out and talking about grief,
Yeah.
until my granddaughter passed, and then I'm
Right.
like, "I don't care anymore."
Yeah.
Like, this is my story. She was my daughter, and I use that word interchangeably, stepdaughter, daughter. I mean, I put everything into her as well as I did my biological children.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was just like, I can't talk about this right now. I can't, it hurts. I can't.
Yep.
But eventually got over myself and found a way to process my grief
Yeah.
without going to those groups. And now I
Right.
still don't know that I could go to a group and just sit in and talk like that, just because I'm just not the type of person. To me, there has to be something that I'm doing, making,
Right.
creating, being a part of, whatever, than just sitting and talking.
Yeah. It's not
I
for
don't,
everybody.
not for me.
Right. But you
I
also
want to
have been
say,
finding
no, go ahead.
what works for you.
Yes, I was gonna say, please, even if you don't feel like that is for you, find something else that is.
Yeah.
Like, find your path into the grief and into the healing and into the resources that are out there, because they are abundant right now at this moment in time. They're more
Yeah.
abundant than they've ever been. And maybe talking in a grief group is not for you.
Right.
Maybe joining a
Maybe.
writing group is.
Right.
Maybe
Who
just
knows?
podcasts.
Yeah. Maybe, yeah, talking to you, talking to me, talking to somebody. That's the important thing. Talking to somebody. There is no reason, I don't believe, at this point in society and all of the tools that are available, that anybody should let them get themselves to the point where they are literally being crushed under their grief. They're dealing with depression. People are taking their own lives because they can't find a way to process
Yeah.
their grief. What the shit? Why?
Right.
How horrible is this situation? And I don't
Well,
judge. I understand. I have known people who have taken their own lives, and it is a horrible thing.
it is.
But it's just, I wish that it didn't have to come to that, because there is a way to find help. I mean, mental illness and mental health is something in this country that, Jesus Christ, it is not dealt with nearly enough.
No.
It just isn't. It is like so many other things which are just pushed to the back burner and are taboo topics and are we don't need to talk about this shit. Yes, we do.
Ew.
In the worst possible fucking way. We have to. We have to get on a better page. We're never going to get on the same page in this country or in any country, but we have to get on a better page. We at least have to be in the same chapter, or worst case, at least within the same
Be in the
book. Because
same book.
yeah, at least in the same book. We have to start talking about this because so many people are going to say, "Oh, mental illness is a joke and it's not real." Fuck you. If you haven't dealt with things, then you don't know what's real and what's not.
I
I say that to everybody. If you are somebody who is going to be judgmental, then you're clearly you're in a bad place in your own mind. And I've said this on my podcast
yeah.
before too. The people who are judgmental and the people who think that this is chicken shit nonsense that we're talking about and are just going to judge about everything. Those aren't the listeners that I want. I frequently encourage those people to stop listening to the podcast. If you are going to be judgmental and then don't listen. Don't listen
Mhm.
to you. Don't listen to me. I don't have an issue with that. I've said in episode 1, if this is not something that you're comfortable talking about, then maybe this show isn't for you. I meant it. I think that I can do a great service and that you can do for so many people, but this isn't for everybody. Whether it's because of the content or because you just think it's a crock of shit. Whatever the case may be, you're entitled to your own opinion as well. If you think that this is not something that you want to listen to, if the topics are too intense, that's fine. If you think that it's a joke and people are just full of crap when they're saying, oh, they're grieving and oh yeah, get over it, suck it up, rub some dirt on it. It isn't that simple. It's not. And if you really think it is, and you're not open to understanding that it's a lot more complicated than that, yeah, don't listen. Go listen to some other podcast because I don't have the time or the crayons to understand how important to explain how important it is that everybody process what they need to process in their own way. And if you honestly believe that you have nothing to process, God bless you. Enjoy your life, and I hope that you get everything out of life that you want, that you deserve. But everybody else has things that they want, they deserve too. And if there are people who can benefit from listening to my podcast, I really hope that they will listen. Again, I know it's not a sexy topic, and that's why it's not all about death. And even like in the beginning, the name Our Dead Dads, like I thought initially this was going to be about dads. It has expanded into way more than that. Like the interviews are not all going to be about dads. They're not even going to all be about directly about death. There's going to be a lot of things coming up that we're going to talk about different topics. And I also encourage people who listen, if you have ideas and topics that I might be able to do an episode on or build a show around, build an episode or a couple episodes around, send them my way. The website is ourdeaddads.com. There are ways of reaching me through that website. Look, just because I'm the podcaster and like as far as editing and things, it's kind of a one-man show. I don't have all the answers. I would love feedback from the listeners. So throw it my way, help me out.
I
And at
love
the
that.
same time, if you have a story that you want to share on the podcast, then also reach out to me there. On the website, under the Contact Us tab, there is a Be a Guest form. Anybody can fill that out. You can fill it out and tell your story, and we'll have an introductory sorry, phone call or Zoom call. And if it seems like a good fit, then we're going to schedule an interview. So there's lots of opportunities, and
Yeah,
I hope to hear from everybody.
I love it. And with that, my gosh, that was a lot of information.
That was sorry about that.
No, but I love it. It's nice to be able to have people be able to go places, and
Yeah.
not just because I might not resonate with everyone, and that's okay. I'm okay with that.
That's
And I want
absolutely
them to
okay.
find people that they can resonate with and get
100%.
support from,
Yeah.
products from, whatever it is, coaching from, if that's what they're into or whatever. I think that
Yeah,
that's so.
that's
Thank you
right.
so much for being on the podcast, and
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. It's an honor to be here. I'm so happy to get to finally have a conversation. And we've got another conversation coming up in a couple of weeks.
you.
I'm going to be interviewing you for my show, and I'm so excited about that as well. So yeah, and I know that especially with now our new common friends, we're gonna be getting to know each other pretty well. I have no doubt about that.
Right? I agree with that. Thank you everyone for listening. Tune in for the next episode coming up, the next week after this one. Go ahead, follow, subscribe, and share. And go ahead and do the same thing for our Dead Dads podcast as well. Go ahead, follow, share, and comment. I don't know if I said that on the first one, but all the things. Do all the things.
Yep.
And
if I may, if anybody wants to follow, we are on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. I do have a YouTube channel, but I really haven't done anything with it, so hold off on the YouTube for now, or follow it and eventually I'll start putting stuff on it. But Facebook, Instagram, TikTok are the three main ones. Either search for Our Dead Dads Podcast, or all of the usernames are at Our Dead Dads Pod.
Oh, good job.
Thank
I
you.
can't even remember all mine. Anyway.
That's why I kept one name for everything, so I didn't have to remember 6 different names.
Right, that's true.
Yeah.
What he said.
That's
Do
right.
it. Bye, everyone. See you in the next episode.
Thank you, Faith.
Thank you so much for listening to this special episode of Release. All the links plus a few extras are posted in the show notes below. And if you think someone you know could benefit by listening to this episode, please share it with them. And as always, keep going, keep being, keep doing. You are amazing.